You saw it in the Super Bowl on Sunday. Defense still wins championships, and having a great pass rush goes a long way. Will the Carolina Panthers find an elite pass rusher this offseason? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and of course, Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, because on Fridays throughout the entirety of the offseason, I'm right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. So all you got to do is either at me or DM me to get your questions in for the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. And on today's episode of Locked On Panthers, we're going to continue our look back at the 2024 season, looking back at every single position as Carolina Panthers head into free agency. In just a month's time, starting on March 10th, is the first day of the legal negotiating period. March 12th will be the beginning of the new league year, and the Panthers will go and try to improve this roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Talk about the defensive line yesterday on the show. Derek Brown coming back. That will certainly be a massive help to the Panthers D-line, but they still need to add players there. And we saw in the Super Bowl on Sunday, the second time now Kansas City has lost the Super Bowl because they could not block a couple years ago in that game during the pandemic that was played in Tampa Bay when they lost the Tom Brady-led Buccaneers. They could not block for Patrick Mahomes. And as a Carolina Panther fan, you have seen what happens when Mike Rimmers is starting for you at tackle. He single-handedly lost the game in 2015, single-handedly lost the game there in 2021 during that season, in 2020, whatever it was, during that season for the Kansas City Chiefs, as he had to start at left tackle and trying to protect Patrick Mahomes. Did not go well for Cam, did not go well for Patrick, and the Chiefs lost that game. We also saw on Sunday, Joe Thuney, who's not a left tackle. They've helped him out a lot this season in Kansas City as they've had issues on the offensive line. And, well, he had problems all day. The overall offensive line had trouble all day for Kansas City against an excellent Eagles pass rush. And it made it even more clear for anyone out there looking at this Panthers defense that until they can find a pass rush, this is not going to be a good to even elite defense in the NFL. And we have seen in the past, this team has had great pass rushes. Go back to 2015 when they went to Super Bowl. Excellent pass rush. Go back even to 2003 when they had an excellent defensive line. Brinson Buckner, Chris Jenkins, Julius Peppers. Outstanding. Get those kind of guys again, and maybe you won't give up 3,000 yards rushing in a season, and maybe your defense won't be a complete embarrassment like it was last year and had even kind of been the year prior under Ojero Rivera. So the pass rush must improve, and that starts with the edge rushers and getting better talent there. And looking back at it in 2024, honestly, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago when looking back at Dan Morgan's free agents, Jadeveon Clowney and DJ Wonnum kind of lived up to the deals that they were signed to. Now, Clowney signing a 2-year, $20 million deal with the max value of $24 million if he hit all those benchmarks in terms of sacks. It looked like a lot, but now looking back on it, not the craziest deal. $12 million of it was guaranteed. $2 million more is guaranteed coming up here. I mean, he got $10 million guaranteed first year. He's going to get $2 million of his salary guaranteed for 2025. He played in 14 out of the 17 games at a 70.8 PFF grade. That was 34th out of 119 edge rushers. So he'll certainly take that. Had a 63.4 run defense grade. That was one of the areas you looked at that he would be better than Brian Burns, as he appeared to be the true replacement to Brian Burns on this Panthers defense in 24. That was 52nd out of 116 edge rushers. Pass rush grade, 73.2. That was 29th out of 109 edge rushers. So overall, top 30, top 35 pass rusher for you coming off the edge. Jadaveon Clowney was last year, had 44 total pressures and 5.5 sacks and 346 pass snaps. You look at it, dividing the pressures with the pass rush snaps, that's 12.7% pressure percentage. That's pretty good. Now, the elite guys are up there at like 17%. Aiden Hutchinson in his short season after being injured or prior to being injured, he had 22%. That was insane. So the elite guys like Myles Garrett are up there. You look at Micah Parsons right up there around 17%. So Clowney doesn't look like he's that far off, but that is a pretty significant gap there between Jadeveon Clowney and those elite guys. Had 46 tackles, 9 tackles for loss. You compare that to last season, had 44 pressures this past year. Back in Baltimore, 71. 5.5 sacks compared to 9.5 sacks, 46 tackles compared to 43 tackles, 9 tackles for loss compared to 9. And Pro Football Reference, they give him far less pressures than PFF does. He had 22, according to Pro Football Reference last year, where back in 2023 at 23. So overall, was pretty much the same player, just did not get home as much. And certainly looking at PFF, did not have nearly as many pressures that he had the year prior when he was with the Baltimore Ravens. But overall, came in, thought he played solid. I'm not going to say he played well, that he was great at all. He was about what I kind of expected. Didn't think he was going to be somebody who was going to come in and, be a game changer, a difference maker for Carolina. Hasn't really been a difference maker since he's been in the league. But overall, it's somebody that Carolina needed, and he came in and pretty much did his job. DJ Wonnum was another big signing for Carolina at edge rusher after they traded away Brian Burns to the Giants. He was the first signing they made at the edge rusher spot. He signed a 2-year, $12.5 million deal. Unfortunately, he was coming off of a partial quad tear that caused him to miss the last couple games there in Minnesota with the Vikings, and then had surgery and had some complications where he ended up having a blood clot in his arm. I had heard about this back in the spring, that there was some sort of setback, heard back during training camp what it was, being the blood clot, and he eventually told his story once he was available to the media midway through the season in Carolina. He missed the first 9 games. He did come out in that debut game over in Munich against the Giants and was really excellent, at a sack in that game, made an impact, and truly, in those last couple of games that he did play in the second half of the season, he had 26 pressures, 4 sacks, and 229 pass rush snaps. That's a pressure percentage of 11%. That's pretty good for somebody who was not available through the entire of the offseason, missed half of the season, had a 55.0 PFF grade. That was only 95th out of 119, but I'm not going to sit here and judge the guy based off of just a half a season. As far as, I'm not going to be critical of that number when clearly watching the games, Wonnum made an impact, and he's somebody that you look at next year, provided that he can stay healthy throughout the offseason, which right now he is. And I'll go ahead and knock on wood, not to jinx anything. And it's a full offseason program in this scheme, having played 8 games last year in Carolina, having gone through the adversity, like the real adversity, not the football, like, oh, we've lost 2 games and our backs against the wall adversity, like real life kind of stuff with the blood clot. Maybe he comes out there and he is even better next year. And he had 8 sacks 2 times when he was in Minnesota. So certainly that is his potential. Maybe he can rise above that moving forward here in Carolina. But that was a solid signing. And I do think a player who could absolutely help Carolina. But I don't necessarily see him being someone who's going to be your A1 edge rusher. If he's your number 2 guy, totally fine. But you got to have like a Danielle Hunter on the other side. And right now, Carolina does not have a Danielle Hunter on the other side right now. And hopefully down the road, they can. I think even ideally, you find 2 top-tier guys, kind of situation you had a couple years ago, like Reddick and like Burns, and then you have Wonnum as your third guy in that ideal scenario. But right now, as a number 2, it's not the worst, but you need a better number 1 than Jadeveon Clowney, and someone who Carolina is still wanting to see develop and turn into that edge rusher who can be a menace on the outside is DJ Johnson. I don't see it happening. This is someone who apparently, I know Carolina took him in the 3rd round. There were teams that had a 6th-round grade on him, and the Panthers wanted him in the 3rd round. Well, not the Panthers. Jerry Rivera wanted him in the 3rd round, and Carolina, back with Scott Fitter still as a GM, the whole collaborative process, they obliged to their DC, their respective DC back then and still respected now, even if the fan base is not happy about him coming back. And DJ Johnson, being a Carolina Panther, is certainly ammunition for you to have wanted him gone, but he's here, and we'll see whether DJ in year 3 can take that massive leap that you would like to see him. But last year was not impressive. I don't think that surprised anybody. He had a 54.2 PFF grade. That was 98th out of 119 edge rushers. Had a 60.3 run defense grade. That was 62nd out of 116. So certainly better. And that is kind of the calling card of what in this scheme of Jerry Rivera wants to see out of his guys, is them stop the run. And so if DJ Johnson get drafted in the 3rd round, you're going to trade up and go get him. He's going to have to be a good run stopper. And, he's about average, a little bit below it. That's not anything to really write home about. And you look at him as a pass rusher, he's not one. He was credited by PFF with 1 pressure and 1 sack on the season and 128 pass rush snaps. You do the math as far as pressure percentage, it does not exist. It's damn near 0. That is not good enough at all. And overall, the pass rush wasn't great this past season. It was better in terms of actually getting sacks back in 2024, where the Panthers were 29th in the league with 32, and they still ranked last in pressure percentage at 15.2. So not ideal where things have been the last couple of seasons, even the one season with Brian Burns, his last one in Carolina, and especially last season where if Wonnum's healthy the whole year, maybe that number, I would certainly think they have more sacks than 32. I would think that pressure percentage is probably a tick higher, but it's not going to be among the top half of the NFL. But if he can come back healthy, if you bring back Clowney, and we'll see what DJ Johnson's role is going to be, but really adding a premium player in that spot, that can help this pass rush. As, again, we saw on Sunday how Philadelphia was all over Patrick Mahomes, how the Chiefs offensive line, which maybe that's more of the story than the Eagles defensive line. But like, we know that Jalen Carter is excellent. We've seen for years Brandon Graham, who probably played his last game. He's been excellent. What Josh Sweat did, and we'll talk about him a little bit later on here on the show. They got a lot of talent there defensively, and the Eagles have always made a point to always have defensive linemen, where Carolina recently, you're looking at it, okay, offensive line, you were aggressive last season. And I talked about being aggressive yesterday when talking about the defensive line. Be aggressive, go get another defensive lineman. Be aggressive and go get a premium edge rusher, and maybe go find 2 this offseason if you can. And makes me think right now, sitting here on February 11th on this Tuesday, is edge rusher the top priority once the NFL draft rolls around? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you can pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. We're about 2.5 months away from the start of the 2025 NFL draft, and the Carolina Panthers, looking at the roster right now, I think that the top priority has to be edge rusher. You have a quarterback, you have an offensive line, defensive line, you got Derek Brown coming back. Would be nice to add somebody else there, but I don't think someone, maybe Mason Graham would make sense, but I have looked at a lot of mock drafts. No one's talked about that. Wide receiver, possibly. Teteroa McMillan from Arizona has been mocked to Carolina at 8. All those are spots where you invested in wide receiver last year by getting Xavier Legette. You got an undrafted free agent rookie in Jalen Coker. You got Adam Thielen coming back. Add somebody who's a veteran, I think, during free agency, and you're probably pretty solid there. But it wouldn't be crazy to take someone there at 8th overall. Probably wouldn't be top of my list. Certainly, actually, no, it wouldn't be top of my list of things to do for the Panthers right now, looking at where the roster's at. Now, you ask me in a month's time, or I guess more than a month's time, about a month and a half's time, a month and a week, let's say that, after the first phase of free agency, maybe my opinion is different. But there are areas that, of course, are needs on the roster, but you look at it, and one of the things I've just always held true in watching football, especially recently, you gain a better understanding as the more and more you watch, the older that you get. D-lines win, man. That's been my philosophy, especially like at the collegiate level, but you even see in the NFL, like, while the quarterback is paramount to being able to have even a chance at all, as we have seen. Like Jalen Hurts, a lot of people criticized him, but the dude was nails in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. He was honestly better in that game when they lost to Kansas City a couple years ago. He was good on Sunday night, maybe a defensive player. It's just a whole defense. You got MVP. I don't really care. Like, with that guy, you have a chance. Like, obviously Mahomes is excellent. Obviously Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, a lot of those guys are excellent. And Joe Burrow, like, you got to have a guy like that. You even have a chance to actually win it. But you can see those greats can be neutralized when you're up on their ass all day long, like Philadelphia was on Sunday night in that Super Bowl, and like Tampa Bay was a couple of years ago. And like, that great defensive lines get you there as well. It wasn't just like what Hurts did for Philadelphia. It was really what that Vic Fangio defense did, what Saquon Barkley was able to do. So the running game, and I know I devalue running backs, but being able to run the football is important. You have to have an offensive line to do that. You have to be able to protect your quarterback. So like when I look at teams, like, okay, do you have an offensive line? Do you have a defensive line and a pass rush? And then you have a quarterback. Like, those are the things I look at first. Your O-line, your D-line first, and then where you have a quarterback. Like the line of scrimmage. It's a line of scrimmage game, and you have to be like, Tepper talks about constant pursuit of a quarterback. No, constant pursuit of people who hate other people who are 300 pounds that run like gazelles and can emaciate a quarterback on any given down. Like, that's what you should be looking for. Not a quarterback all the time. Looking for dudes to destroy a quarterback. Looking for dudes who want to bury that man literally on the field every single down. That's what I would want. And that's what I think Carolina Panthers should be looking for at 8th overall, looking at it right now on Tuesday, February 11th. Then we'll talk about the Myles Garrett thing. We talked about it on Friday. Go back and listen to that show. We'll talk about it briefly later on in the show. Like, assuming they don't get Myles Garrett at 8, they're looking for an edge rusher. Because if they get Myles Garrett, they're not going to have the 8th overall pick. Let's just be real here. Let's all be adults. They're going to have to give up that 8th overall pick in order to get him, if they're able to get him. Mykell Williams, Jalen Walker, both those players out of Georgia, those are the two I've most seen commonly mocked to Carolina. Now, if you look at their numbers from their career at UGA and even this past season, they're really not that eye-opening. Jalen Walker had 6.5 sacks this past season. Mykell Williams had 5. They did end up winning the SEC championship. And the game that you got to look back at to see their potential is the game in Austin against Texas the first time around. Even the second time around, they also were really good as they put pressure on Quinn Ewers. And that was a Texas offensive line where Kelvin Banks is going to be a top 10 pick, their left tackle. Cam Williams, their right tackle, he's also somebody who's likely to get drafted in top 100 picks. They had a really good offensive line there at Texas. And when they went up against a defensive line, again, D lines win, they got their ass kicked twice. And it cost them an SEC title, cost them a chance to have a bye in the playoff in college football this past year. So those are the two guys I've seen. I don't necessarily have like a high, crazy opinion on either one of them. Like, I'm not saying like I'm not high on them, I'm not low on them. It's just I wouldn't be mad about it at all. Like, the guy obviously you want is Abdul Carter. Now, there's an argument that he's the best player in the draft. Maybe it's Travis Hunter's the best player in the draft. I don't know. But he does certainly play a more premium position. Edge rusher is a more important position in football, as demonstrated again in the Super Bowl, than wide receiver or cornerback, which Travis Hunter does both, which is why there's a great argument that he's the best player in this draft. The Titans, they've talked about, now they have a new regime there. At least they brought a new general manager. They still kept around Callahan for whatever reason. Maybe we'll find out down the road why they kept him. I doubt it. But they came out and said that they're not going to pass on a generational talent. Now, generational talent is an overused term. And it seems like everybody's a generational talent. A guy like Travis Hunter actually is, because we have not seen someone do this in literally a generation. Have we seen somebody do what Abdul Carter does? Yeah, every Sunday. You ever heard of TJ Watt, Myles Garrett? I mean, different body types, certainly. Micah Parsons, that's the comp. We've seen it plenty of times. So he's not a generational talent, but he is a guy who is a plug and play difference maker at the edge rusher spot wherever he goes. And I would love for him to be at 8. Not going to happen. Probably should be gone at 1. Tennessee's probably going to reach for a quarterback. I get it. You got to have one, but damn, dude, if you can't get the quarterback on the ground, does it really matter? And if you can't protect them, same case, which their offensive line is not great. What does it do? So that's what it looks like right now to me. Top priority would be an edge rusher. Now, there's one more thing I want to throw out there before we talk about how they should approach the offseason, just looking at the roster and then talk about Myles Garrett. Let's go back to the Super Bowl on Sunday. Josh Sweat, see him? He was outstanding. Had 2.5 sacks in that game, 4 tackles for loss. That is a guy who right now, I believe is 28, 29. He's a free agent. Got a couple void years on his contract. Going to be really tough for Philadelphia to keep him around. And there's a lot of guys. Eagles going to have a tough time keeping him around just based off of their cap situation. They won a Super Bowl, and it all paid off in the end. Look at the Saints. They're nowhere close to Super Bowl, and they have basically the same cap situation. Browns, same case as well. But he is somebody who could be available this offseason. And I was looking at Spot Track, the placer contracts. His market value is 3 years, $56 million, average salary of $18 million. That probably went up because of the game on Sunday. Because like with quarterbacks and edge rushers, the same thing is like, what do you do in the games that matter? Like, cool, week 8, you made great plays, but when it mattered most, when the team needed you to make a big play, could you do it? And well, the answer emphatically was yes for Josh Sweat on Sunday in that game down there in New Orleans against KC. So just want to throw that name out there. Why not get him and then maybe double dip? If you can sign somebody as a priority free agent with the money that you have available and that you're also going to probably open up, I would imagine, why not sign someone to a big deal like that who's still young enough, still under 30, and then double dip later on in the draft and go get another top tier guy? Because if you're telling me you can get Josh Sweat and then you compare that with Mykell Williams or Jalen Walker, and fine, bring back Clowney if you want to do that, bring back TJ Wonnum and have TJ Johnson, much better edge rusher situation. You can't say, Clowney's going to back up now, and you're going to have one of us back. Depth, get more guys. The depth this past year was terrible, and the frontline guys they had also weren't really – they did their jobs. They, for the most part, like I've said it, it looked like when you look at the contracts, you look at what they produced, okay, yeah, they kind of lived up to it. But they're not special and never have been at this level. So I do think Josh Sweat's somebody that Carolina should look at. And obviously right now at a edge rusher all the way. So how should and will the Carolina Panthers approach the edge rusher spot this offseason? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for a shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Overall, looking back at how things were handled in the offseason a year ago, you have to say that Dan Morgan did do a solid job as far as trying to find replacements for Brian Burns. It was a situation where Carolina was not willing to give him the $30 million per year contract that the Giants gave him, that Dan got back the compensation that really was available to him. He called up his old friend Joe Shane from their time up in Buffalo, and Joe was willing to give him Brian Burns. They was willing to give him the 5th round picks and what was it, an extra second as well. And we have talked about what Dan Morgan and what Brant Tilson, his organization, did by utilizing those compensation and be able to get some players out of it, like Xavier Legette, like Jonathan Brooks, and a 2nd round pick next year, or actually this upcoming year in the draft. So we'll see, though, this offseason, if they can find someone to truly replace Brian Burns. As Clowney came in, solid, not great, but solid, did his job. Same thing with TJ Wonnum when he was available. You can see the promise there. And all right, fine. But this is not a great edge rushing group. And that is very clear from what we witnessed this past year. And certainly you can say, what if Wonnum was healthy the whole 17 games of the season? Okay, fine. Still, not going to be a great edge rushing group. I don't think he was going to be some sort of revelation for the Panthers. And Amari Barno wasn't healthy this season, and he's somebody who he actually ended the season on IR after suffering a shoulder injury. He missed most of the season because of that shoulder at the end of the season, but really recovering from the ACL, only played 5 games. He's somebody who's going to come back, and we'll see what role he plays. That's still certainly up in the air, as he's primarily been a special teamer. So far, the Panthers have signed Boogie Basham, who played at Wake Forest, Kenny Dyson, and Thomas Incoom. Incoom actually had to start a game this past season, all the futures contracts, so they'll be around likely for training camp. And I did see, looking at PFF, I was looking at just some of the numbers from these edge rushers in Carolina this past season, and I was shocked when I saw that Boogie Basham had some pretty impressive grades when he played. Yeah, he had a 73.7 grade. And he only played in 86 snaps this past season. So it had a 73.7 overall grade, a 75.8 run defense grade. So that's somebody to look at as possibly a diamond in the rough that Carolina might have found who can help them out. I believe he was with the Rams before coming to Carolina. But yeah, that's where they're at. Cam Gill's the only free agent, more of a special teamer, had the worst grade actually of all these guys, 49.1. So unless he's coming back, actually Kenny Dyson had a 35.1. So unless Cam Gill is coming back to be someone that they want to have as a special teamer, then, I mean, whatever, not worried about it. DJ Johnson, he ended the season on the non-football injury list. Unfortunately, sustained a concussion in a car accident. Obviously, that's a significant injury. Could have, of course, been worse. So prayers up still for him. Hopefully, he's recovered all fine and he'll be ready to go. But those are kind of where things stand right now. Now, there's a couple things Carolina can consider doing as far as salary cap. Look at Jadeveon Clowney. $2 million of it's guaranteed his contract this upcoming season. They could cut him and they could save $7.7 million. But that would have a $6 million dead money charge. That's one way to open up some cap space. And if you're getting rid of Clowney and you're bringing in Josh Sweat, or of course Myles Garrett, then like you're not really worried about it at all. Someone would say there's no sweat because like forget it. But the dead money, that's one thing that is certainly prohibitive. You look at DJ Wonnum, he does have a bunch of void years on his deal, but they could cut him and save $6.2 million. There would be a $1.7 million dead money charge this year, and there's a couple of dead money charges in a couple years leading past 2025. Still, though, you look at how he performed. Like I would think that both, like one of them certainly is coming back. Clowney, there could be a conversation there. He did say last year when he signed, well, hey, every contract's a one-year contract. I could go out there after one season, ask for a new contract. The team could say, we're done with you after that season, even if you're still under contract. I would think right now that both those guys are probably going to come back. But what about a Myles Garrett trade? Talk about it at length on Friday during a weekly Friday mailbag. So go listen back to that to get my full thoughts on the situation. But there's three ways to look at it. Number one, the Browns cap situation is a mess. It would really, right now, it's prohibitive for them to go out there and make this trade. Like, it does not benefit them at all. They lose the best, arguably the best defensive player in the NFL by trading away, and then their cap situation is a complete mess. There's a bunch of players that they could restructure or get rid of, and if they traded Myles Garrett, it would undo all of that they did to try to get under the salary cap for this upcoming season. So we'll see what happens there, because that's one thing to look at. Compensation, not crazy. Saw Diana Rossini. She talked to an NFL exec anonymously, and he said probably a 1+, saying it's not going to be 3 1s, saying a 1 and a 2, a 1 and 2 3s, throw a player in there. I don't know if you want to give up your 1 and your 2, a 1 and a 3, sure. And then you're going to have to extend them. And the extension likely in the ballpark of $35 million per year. You were not willing to do that last year with Brian Burns, a younger player, and certainly Myles Garrett, a lot better than Brian Burns. Totally understand that. But it's one of those things where it's the youth, and it's also him being a Pro Bowler twice and a guy who's done all the right things, homegrown, that would lead you to pay the guy what he wants. But I can't sit here and balk at paying Myles Garrett that kind of money, because he certainly would be well worth it, you would think. And the third thing, too, is got to convince him that Carolina is a Super Bowl contender. He put in a statement that his dream was not to go from Cleveland to Canton, which is a direct shot at their general manager, Andrew Berry, up there in Cleveland, according to Jonathan Jones, now CBS Sports. But he said he wants to win a Super Bowl. And looking at Carolina, this is not a team that's been in the playoffs since his rookie year back in 2017. So they're closer as far as being playoff contention because of what Bryce Young did in the second half of the season, where this offense appears to be headed. And with some changes defensively, certainly they can be far better, and that can be worth a couple wins right there. Will that be worth enough wins to win the NFC South or to make the wild card next season? We'll see. But I know you want him, and I get it. I want him here too in Carolina. But yeah, it feels like a tough sell to me to tell this guy that Carolina's Super Bowl contender. Maybe he sees it. But I don't know. But as far as what I think that they should do, I do think they'll draft one. I do think right now, looking at it, 8, it's got to be an edge rusher. I feel like they should double dip. You're not in a situation where, like DJ Johnson, he's not giving you anything. Amari Barno's probably not going to give you anything. Just having Clowney, just having Wonnum is not enough. Like, Clowney's a fine player, but come on. Like, Wonnum, think he also can. I think he can show you more. I honestly feel like you get more out of Wonnum, you're going to get out of Clowney. Quite honestly, why not try an upgrade by getting someone for the future and getting someone also for the now? And hell, the future could be now with whoever they take 8th overall, and then try to be aggressive and get somebody. Dan said, want to be smart, want to be but aggressive. He said aggressive but smart. Like, why not? Go out there, be aggressive. Go fix the defensive line. Go fix the edge rusher. Like, that's how you win football games. It's a line of scrimmage game. You got your quarterback in place. You got your offensive line in place. Now it's time to go out there and fix the defensive line and look like a real football team defensively in 2025. So we'll see what Carolina decides to do there at the edge rusher spot this offseason. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council, where I'll be back with you on Wednesday, or on Friday, rather, answering your weekly Friday mailbag question. Wednesday is when I do it throughout the regular season, but Friday throughout the offseason. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday.